Welcome to the show. It is another beautiful Sunday in the middle of America. It is Toward Anarchy. I'm Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, even if it's not live, if you're listening to us later on through the archive or across any one of those great places like Spotify or TuneIn or iHeartRadio, all those wonderful streaming places that you can find it, or perhaps even this week on the YouTube, because I will make that happen. I've been very lax about it, but we're actually capturing video today. And so I'll have some fun with that. I'll play with the video a little bit. I know a lot of oftentimes on the internet or over the radio, we see things or hear things. People claim things. They say that they can or do or are or be or whatever, something that you're like, maybe not. We'll take advantage of the camera today and we'll play with some of this stuff. I'll show you some of my toys and things that I've mentioned over the time that we've been doing this little thing here. I mentioned that I'm here in the middle of America. That's Topeka, Kansas, and we made the news this week. You probably heard about this. It was the Goodyear tire plant here in Topeka, Kansas, that the slide came out that it showed that people couldn't wear Blue Lives Matter shirts or MAGA shirts or hats and stuff like that to work, but they could wear the Black Lives Matter things, and that set off a whole uproar. And for a while, people weren't sure if it was even real or not, but then it came out that it actually was right here. The Goodyear plant here north of town is an interesting little thing. And when I say little, it's not little, it's huge. It's like its own city inside almost. They have their own fire department and own emergency services and all sorts of things like that. I know a couple of people that work in there. I don't know them well, so I haven't had deep conversations with them, but just in passing, conversations about how big it is out there, and it's everything I imagine that you imagine a gigantic factory that produces tires and has all kinds of chemicals and hazardous things about, machinery and equipment and processes and things like that, all about that. How it could be. I imagine that's exactly what it's like from the conversations that I've had with people. So we're famous here in Topeka this week. That's our call to fame. And what can you do? You have to feel for the guy, the president, and because there's stuff like that happens, and then of course I mentioned the thing about the service here last weekend, just in passing, just sort of making a little bit of a joke about it. But the reality is that it actually happens. People do steal stuff out of the mailbox. And then, of course, this week I'm watching videos. I'm catching videos off the YouTube, and it's sort of postal service employees taking entire trays of paid for pamphlets, things presumably for the Republican Party, for in support of the president, whatever, something along those lines, and taking those and dumping them, the whole tub of them, into the dumpster instead of delivering them in the mail like they've been charged with doing, and they've been paid to do, as it were. Probably with your tax dollars. If nothing else, it should make you mad that they were doing that. And so you have to feel for the guy a little bit. I don't particularly care about who the president is or anything like that, and there's no love lost for any of them, because to me, at first and foremost, their state is trying to manipulate other people's lives. But ultimately, they're just these weird sort of controlling people to me, and I find no difference in them. But when they speak truth, I will tell you that they've spoken truth, at least as I see it, or at least as the facts may seem to make it seem that they are. I will credit them for that. And when it comes to the media abusing them like they do this particular president, I guess I don't recall this under Obama. Am I wrong? I mean, of course on Fox, but that's like a sort of right-wing bastion of where you would expect it, and maybe my friends here across the network on RBN, maybe some poking, but that's to be expected. Those are political places. They have their reality is steeped in their political reality. There's no separating there. You don't go to RBN necessarily to look for liberal views. If you do, you might have come to the wrong spot. You don't go to Fox to look for liberal views. At least you didn't. You will now. Apparently, I guess Bill Gates is buying it. I don't know. I can't keep up with all this. I have the book in front of me. I started a new book. We're over a year into the new show here, and I couldn't stop writing stuff this week. You can go from one week to the next. I guess I can show this. Do I have it? Is it right there? It's not sitting right there. The old one. I guess I can show just. I just have like last week and the week before maybe. Well, so okay. So the 9th when I had James Donovan on. I knew what I was talking about all day. I was talking about the free market, and so I literally wrote just 2 sentences down, like 2, 3, 4-word sentences. That's it, and that's all I wrote for that week. But then you come to this week. It's the 16th. August 16th, by the way. Or 23rd in my world. Sorry, 16th was the next page. It's the 23rd, and then I have the whole page sort of noted out and drawn on dividing up my individual thoughts because there's just so much stuff going on, and I just every time I turned around I was jotting down another note, something about something I watched, the fact that Topeka was in the news. I wrote the words "nothing's real," and that is kind of how I feel right now. It's Am I wrong in this? Does anybody else feel like this right now? Like everything's just sort of, it's a weird fantasy thing going on. Everything's not quite right, but everybody's trying to make it seem like it's right. Like everything's going along just fine, except yeah, producer Ken agrees, and I've seen other people that I think agree with me too, just across the social media and people that I've met out on the street. Not that I'm wandering around the streets that much, running into people trying to talk to them, but I do own a local business and I do spend some time there, and I see people come in, and just general attitude of people and their really their lack of understanding of what's going on. I can say to somebody, I can say, this isn't over yet. The COVID thing, the ramifications from COVID, all that's surrounding it, food shortages, all of the things that are tied into what's happened since they started the COVID panic. It's not done yet, and it's weird because I think what's happening is that a lot of America is not in the big cities. Of course, there's a large number of people, and they're there, and so they're seeing something different than we are, and not just on the street. But I think the reason for it is in the money and the employment. I think out here in Topeka and a lot of America, just smaller America, not tiny America, but of course that too, just smaller America, right, all along has had higher unemployment rates and disenfranchised people than is recognized by the majority. There's a fake, there's a facade that's put on in the city, and it's to the advantage, especially if you've lived there for a long time. And it's just that, okay, fine, we're all here and we just have to live with each other, and you just kind of let it be. And you can't live in New York City and really have a job. I mean, you can and not have a job. You can, but not really. you take a large city like New York City, you have to not only have a job, you have to have a good job. It has to pay quite a bit of money for you to be able to live in New York City and to stay there. And so I think there's a disconnect in what appears to be and what really is unemployment. And of course, I talk about this all the time, how they manipulate those numbers multiple times throughout the month and throughout the year to adjust them, and you can't ever trust them. And so what has been closer to 25% unemployment is easier to see in Topeka than it is in New York City. And so I think it's taking a long time for what's happening across the nation and around the world economically to trickle down, as it were, to the smaller cities, the places like the Topeka. We're already poorer and worse off than many other places, and so that facade takes a, a lot longer to wear off in some ways, and a lot shorter time to wear off in other ways. It depends on your perspective, where you spent that time. I've been back and forth. I've seen a little bit of both. I have friends in big cities, and what's going on in the big cities is not the same thing that's going on in the smaller towns. In this, what I see in a place like Topeka is that people don't really get that this isn't over yet. They haven't felt it yet. So we'll see. Everything to me seems like it's real, but I just have this whole page of stuff. The president's mail woes. I mentioned that already, I guess. Well, that's nice. Some of these things will be knocked off. Hundreds of millions of genetically engineered mosquitoes approved for release in Florida, in the Florida Keys. That's fantastic. That's wonderful news. New York City is dead. We were talking about New York City. There's a fantastic article from a long time New York resident, New York City resident that is talking about how the city is dead. This is what I'm talking about, the disconnect. You don't see this in Topeka, Kansas. This already existed. The mall was already dead over here, the older mall. The nicer mall is dying, will be dead when this is all done. They're not talking about it. Nobody's seeing it. Nobody shops in the stupid mall anyway. They have horrible shops. It's for teenagers. It's all of that. So why would you shop in the mall? But Topeka's just closer to it. And so it's glaring when you drive down New York City streets and you see that stuff is boarded up. You see that people aren't on the street, especially when you realize that there are millions of people in that vicinity and that they're all on the street and they're all doing something and the stores are never closed. So this argument is that they've killed it, that they've managed to kill it. That what'll happen is that because these people have to leave there because they can't find gainful employment, and that's a whole trickle down thing. Broadway's dead, all of it. That all of these things, all these businesses, all these people will go other places, and they will make root, and it will take a long time for New York City, if ever, to recover from it. And this is going to be this will be true of all these larger cities like this. New York City's particularly prone to it because it is absolutely a tourist destination in and of itself. Of course, you have Broadway, all the things that are in and around New York City that attract so many people, and then they end up coming there and they stay, and business is built up around the people that come there, and they'll stop coming. They've already stopped coming, and there's something of 60% of businesses have closed. Certainly. When you're talking about service businesses, restaurants, things like that, even more. He talks in the article, you have to look for it. New York City is dead forever. I didn't. Did I share it? Maybe I did. Go to towardanarchy.com. You're looking for August 23rd, contrary to my own beliefs. You'll see Tanner Cook is coming up in just about 15 minutes. We'll get him on here, and you'll be able to catch him on the video. We'll have the video. We'll post that to YouTube when it's all said and done, along with the regular archive, as we always do each Sunday. But Tanner Cook is author of Liberty and the Will to Power, a manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian. So we're going to have this wonderful conversation conversation about living the life that I talk about all the time and not basing it on it. It's funny because I use the word moral a lot, and so I myself I'm always analyzing what I say, and so I try to back off of it. So recently I've taken a call this, instead of saying moral and or principled individual in your beliefs, whether you believe whether there's a morality tied to your belief system or not. We'll have a great conversation. Link to him on Facebook, and to buy the book on Amazon is there. And I did share The New York City is Dead Forever by James Altucher, and he explains exactly why. That link is there. It's a New York Post. Hopefully, it doesn't end up being behind a paywall for you if you looked at too many of their articles, but it's a great little article, and it gives you an indication of what you may not be seeing across the rest of the nation. There's also another article there, the war on poverty, on property. As always, this conversation again is still just grating me, and I keep having it with people in this private property nonsense. Owners and this war on property owners, landlords has begun as the number of calls for government appropriation of private property is growing. You'll start to see it in the bigger cities and places like that. They already do it. They already have rent freezes and things like that on landlords, and they make it so that they have to meet certain prices and certain obligations, just cost wise, to keep up with, to manipulate the market. I'm not talking about providing basic services as they're supposed to do, and repairing the place and stuff like that. I'm just talking about just to be available on the market, in the market. Shared a quote as always. This was interesting because this conversation has been on my mind before, and I've had a hard time trying to find the right person to talk to about it. But I thought this quote was great. Jesus Christ was the supreme example of authentic anarchy, the creative, nonviolent anarchist par excellence, working not from the top down, but from the bottom up with the poor and the poorest of the poor to empower people and enable them to realize their potential as men and women made in the images of God. And while we may not agree on what Jesus was or who he was, what God is, what that is, what it means to people, who it is within themselves, that includes with Dave Andrews. Your thoughts with Dave Andrews and God may not be the same, but I left the link there as always to find out who he is. He's a Christian anarchist. Hippie looking fellow. He looked like he might be fun and interesting to hang out with for a little bit, but the God thing might grate on me a little bit. It might get a little old. I tell you, I finally watched Tread, the Netflix documentary about Marv Haymeyer, the guy who armored up the bulldozer and took it for a ride in Granby, Colorado. And I have to say, he's lauded as some sort of modern day Robin Hood, and I don't know, listening to his own tapes and listening to his own words and seeing the sort of things that happened after watching that documentary, he's not he's not a good example of a patriot. He's a good example of someone who's been wrong, who goes way too far and uses religion and statism and any other excuse that they can as a reason to damage property and harm other people. You have to watch the documentary, because I know you're shaking your head. You're going, "No, he was a hero." But I put the things up there for you. I left the links. I gave you the information. It's all for you to decide. I put a meme up there that was pretty controversial when I shared it in the social media. It's a picture of a gentleman in a MAGA hat. I believe that the cartoon is originally altered. It was about killing a cop originally, but this was about a little boy. You probably heard about the little boy. He was killed by a madman who lived next door to him because he rode his bike across his lawn. I believe that's the understanding of it. At any rate, this was just some criminal scumbag piece of crap. that they wrapped up in about 24 hours and charged him, and he's on his way to, hopefully I don't wish it on anybody. His hopefully justice for the family. There, that's what hopefully he's on his way for. This meme. What about this boy who was killed? Where are the protests for him? And I put this there because I've seen this argument. I've heard this argument repeated a couple of times. Even had it repeated in person to me. Why aren't people protesting for him? Well, okay. Well, did they catch the guy who did it? Yes, they did. Did they charge the guy who did it? Absolutely, they did it immediately. He's going to jail probably forever. Yes, yes. So where is the need to protest? I don't understand. It's one of these faulty arguments that is it. Sometimes it's an honest attempt to make a real argument. Other times it's just an effort to push an agenda that's not necessary. There's no point in this. Do you want more people to get away with crime? It's a weird argument. It just seems it's kind of a weird backward kind of argument to me. He's the problem with the protests. Let's talk just about the initial protest, the beginning, what started it all, has to do with police brutality. Police brutality. But I think a lot of people want him executed on TV. That's the feeling about this guy. Well, and they feel about this way about this Derek Chauvin too. People feel that they want this guy executed and drug out into the street and abused and beaten and I'm not making any excuses for any criminal activity on the part of anyone. I'm just talking about this complete disregard for life that in a lot of cases comes with authority or assumed authority. The assumed notion that because he's been given a badge or somebody's been given a badge that they have the right to go ahead and kill someone in a situation where someone else couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't. It's a big difference in just some psychopath killing somebody, racism or not, doesn't matter. He's arrested. He's in the system. They're going for justice. The parents want him dead. The parents want revenge. And you know where I stand on this. It's their call. They're the ones that have been violated. That poor little boy certainly can't do anything about it now. But to me, it comes down to what those parents want. They want revenge. It's theirs. It's their right to take it, and their right to seek anyone in achieving their justice. That's the reality. That's the real reality of the world. It's the interesting thing that runs the thread that runs through tread. That same notion that you are about to experience what happens when you violate somebody and they don't care anymore, or they feel like for whatever reason their God or their beliefs or whatever it is that they've just been wronged enough that they can go ahead and just kill you, to destroy your property, to take it out on you. Well, if you violated them in the first place, I don't care if you have a badge. I don't care if you call yourself king or president or whatever label that you've placed on yourself or others maybe happily placed on you through the magic of voting, whatever. It doesn't give you the right to just unilaterally kill other people, to steal from other people. None of this does. Not democracy, not your republic, not your view that the other guys are crazier than you. You're all crazy. We're all just in our own little way, and we all know it. And it'd be better if a lot of us would admit it. Yeah, it might help out the situation just a little bit if some more people would admit how crazy they are. Because for one, the people that don't normally see it, that get along with it, that go along with it, will actually hear it from their mouth and maybe potentially believe it. That person's crazy. Maybe we shouldn't be listening to them. For August 23rd, Tanner Cook is my guest today. Liberty and the Will to Power, a manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian. What a fantastic name for a book. He's joining the conversation, and we get to do video. It's good to see you, man. You're looking good there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's a real pleasure. Tanner is one of these hoodlum anarchist digital friends of mine that I've had for a while, and he's somebody that hasn't been unfollowed. So I'm seeing his content come across my screen on the social media, and I see that he's written this book, "Liberty and the Will to Power: A Manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian," and the word amoral right there attracted me. So I had to go and look at it, and I read the read. I might have to do that. If you go to towardanarchy.com, August 23rd is the date you're looking for. You'll see I shared links. You can follow the book on Facebook, and then of course you can buy the book there on Amazon.com. And there was this wonderful write-up. I don't. Is this something you did, or did you get somebody to do this for you? The thing that's up on Amazon.
No, that's all me. It's independently published, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about that because I want to know about that. I think that's important. There's a lot of people doing that, and I want to know how it's benefited you across the board, hopefully. Whatever happened to the idea of liberty? When was it decided that freedom can only flourish within the walls of tyranny? What God, little g, among us declared that the primary mode of libertarianism must consist of a slavish adherence to moral imperatives. It is not possible for liberty to have a more proper... Is it not possible? I did that last time I read it too. Is it not possible for liberty to have a more proper conception and a philosophy that only requires a man to be free? From the author that brought you the case against the state, Tanner Cook now unleashes this new perspective of libertarianism. He presents an argument for the free individual without appealing to dogmatic moral systems or constructing any new ideology, deontology, or any ideology or anything about it. I thought that was what was important to me because I like to say that this anarchist, libertarian, voluntarist stuff doesn't require a study. It requires practice. We just need to do it.
Exactly, right. No, I would agree. And you started it off right by saying you hung on to the word amoral right there, because that's a kind of a trigger point for a lot of people, especially in the libertarian anarchist circles. Most of us consider ourselves to be very moral, and to have a more consistent morality than those of the statists and whatnot. So when somebody puts out a libertarian manifesto that suggests something contrary to that, it really catches people's attention real quick, I think. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing some of the feedback that I get from it.
Yeah, well, it's great because I was just talking about this. It's funny how all these things end up tying together because I just most recently did this myself. I started replacing the word moral with principled. Because okay, your principles can have morality to them. They can be based in morality that exists in your head or exists on a piece of paper or somewhere or exists in other people's heads, and that's fine. But principle, with or without the morality, let's stand on principle. And I think that we have a big problem right now across the board I expect it from the left. I do not expect this from the right or from the anarchists or from the libertarians, the voluntarists, whatever they call themselves. This disregard for property rights. To me, that's something that's principle. It's key. It's core. That you can't call yourself libertarian. You can't even call yourself a Republican. You can't even call yourself a decent Republican if you don't respect property rights.
Right.
That seems moral and dogmatic a little bit, but I don't think it is because I maybe am I wrong?
No, and I think the conversation it can get really deep, really complicated very quickly, and so
When you start using words like moral instead of principle.
Exactly. It's in philosophy, these things, people write volumes of books on these topics to think that you can do a 30-second blurb on it and somehow encompass your position on morality or something like that is it's just never going to happen. But like you said, property rights, free market type society, that's something that most libertarians, anarchists, and like you mentioned, Republicans, the right, they seem to adhere to that, to the idea of those principles that develop free markets and property rights and whatnot. And like you said, you can kind of get away from the use of the word moral and morality and still embrace those types of concepts, because we can find them to be mutually beneficial. We can find them to be a better world to live in for everybody involved, including ourselves, if we were to bring about these ideas and bring them to full fruition. So I think you don't, like you're saying, you don't necessarily have to take a moral stance on it, but you can recognize the practicality of it. You can recognize the pragmatic aspect of free markets and principles that lead to free markets and property rights and whatnot. So I think you're absolutely right. You don't necessarily have to ascribe any sort of moral worldview to it. And I think that's a good point to make.
Yeah, well, and I gathered that's what the book was about, and so I thought it'd be great to come and talk about that, because I think that we get bogged down in it. I think that a lot of religious people will run to libertarianism as because it seems to protect their religious right, but then they tend to, and I hate to generalize. I hate to do it at all. But it seems to happen that if you have a particularly morally religious, dogmatic stance in the world, that it's going to reflect on your political stance, and it's going to alter your opinion of the principal ideas of something like an anarchy or a libertarianism, where it can seem to be immoral because the 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 first the first notion is the individual has to be first, simply because if I'm not first, I can't do anything for anybody else. And a lot of times I think that the religious, the morally dogmatic, can't get past that, just that beginning hump when it comes to the idea of libertarianism. It keeps them from making that jump to anarchism, to libertarianism, from that, maybe that Christian right, which a lot of my audience is.
Yeah, and Nietzsche calls out too, when somebody even abandons to take kind of one step further what you're talking about the religious, even when somebody abandons their religious inclinations, let's say they go from being a Christian to atheist or something like that, they seem to cling a lot. They don't lose their sense of morality. They don't lose their need for moral systems and moral worldviews. And so they need to now fill that void where they once had God and religion. They need to put those same types of moral directions and imperatives into some other channel, and so that typically falls into politics, and they choose their party that most represents kind of what they want to abide by, and that's where we get a lot of religiosity in politics itself, because it has that intermix of moral imperative. But yeah, and the book, it's called the Manifesto for Amoral Libertarians. It's not to say, and I talk about this a lot, I bring it up several times within the book, just to reiterate, it's not about throwing away all of our moral maxims and all of these things that we consider right and wrong. It isn't about just disregarding it as if they don't have any effect on our lives. It's more about understanding the moral system that you're currently wrapped up in and questioning it and asking yourself, is this the direction I want to go, or am I just abiding by this because it's my inclination as a human being to be constantly guided and directed, like the sheep and the flock being directed by the shepherd and the sheepdogs all the time. And I feel like sometimes libertarians and anarchists fall into that category of the sheep many times, and it can be harmful to their conception of liberty, and it does us well to sometimes question, okay, this is what I feel is right. Is this what I truly want to be right, or is this just some sort of systematic, dogmatic view that I have that I need to question, and that maybe I'm preventing myself from being a free individual because of these things. So it's a complicated, it can be very controversial at times within the book. I attack some ideas. Well, I shouldn't say that I attack them. I critique them in a way that can be off-putting to many libertarians and anarchists, and it was a struggle to even write it myself. It's a big change of tone from my first book, The Case Against the State, where it was more mainstream libertarianism, all about free markets and non-aggression, and this kind of takes somewhat of a different perspective of it, and it's touchy at points, but I think it does us good to think about it.
Oh, give me an example of something that you found was actually hard for you. You had to reconcile it in your brain, make your brain change your those pathways that connect, to new ideas.
So one of the biggest struggles, the ideas that came to my mind when writing this was the conception of power, and how libertarians and anarchists tend to view power in itself. We almost view it as something that's always corruptive and always destructive, and it should be destroyed and done away with, and we shouldn't touch it. And I started to question that when I wrote it. Is that necessarily the case? Is power something that's only destructive and it can only corrupt? And should we not take the opportunity to harness it? And that's obviously a hot button question within the libertarian ranks. I mean, you have the Libertarian Party, right? The capital LP that attempts to harness the power, right? The political power, that is.
The ring.
Right, the ring. And I call that out in my book too. I call out the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's idea of power. And I think Tolkien represents the other perspective, right? The more anarchist perspective of, no, the political apparatus is not the way towards liberty, and there's that inconsistency between the two. And I started to ask myself about that. It's like, well, which one of these parties is right? The ones who reject political power, or the ones who feel like attaining the power is the only way to bring about their ideas of liberty. And I came up with kind of a thought experiment that helped me process it a little bit. If you picture yourself that you're in a room with a bunch of people, right? And in the middle of that room, there's a table, and on the center of that table, there's a gun, a loaded firearm, right? Now, if, let's say, the anarchist in the room says power is corrupt, the gun is a metaphor for power, right? Once you have it, you have power over everybody else in that room. And the anarchist might stand on principle and moral imperative and say, no, power is corruptive, it's destructive, I don't want any part of it, I'm not going to take up the firearm. Well, I think we can all agree that, that's perfectly fine if somebody wants to take that stance, but we should all be aware that anarchist will then become subjected to whoever does decide to take up that firearm. And rest assured, someone will. And it will be somebody who desires the power. And so if somebody wants to be free, if somebody wants to be liberated, pragmatically, the best way to do that would be to harness the power, to attain and grab that firearm. Now, that's uncomfortable for us to think about, to think that, you have kind of two choices. You can stand on moral principle and reject power and say that power is immoral and that it's destructive and we shouldn't participate in it. And that's perfectly fine, but you have to realize that you will then become subjected to it and victimized by it and oppressed by it, tyrannized by it, because somebody is going to pick up that firearm. And so if somebody wants to be free, if they want to be liberated, their best possible course of action would be to grab that firearm. And that was an incredibly tough thing for me to think about when I was writing this book, because I didn't want to write that. I didn't want to include that. That went against a lot of things that I believe to be true. And I made it clear in the book, too, that this doesn't just simply refer to political power. And in fact, I make an argument against political power because I don't believe that political power is the best way to become liberated anyway. Political power involves not the acquisition of power for your own sake, for your own liberation, but you're joining a collective, you're joining an institution that has its own will, and you can become part of that and become powerful within it, but it's never going to be your will. It's never going to be your freedom. You're only as free as you are following the imperatives of the state, and I don't think that's the best pathway to freedom. So it is more complicated than simply political power. Power can come in various different forms, but ultimately, I think it's very clear to me that the power element is fundamental in the social landscape, and if you choose to stand on moral principle and refuse any acquisition of power and view power, as Tolkien did, as this thing that must be destroyed, I think it's flawed, a flawed perspective of power, and that so long as you take that position, you're subjecting yourself to always being the slave to whoever does possess, that gun in the room. It's a very, very difficult thing for libertarians and anarchists, particularly those who were like myself and don't like the idea of power. It's very difficult to think about that, but what I tried to do in my book is present a positive case for the acquisition of power. And in order to do that, you almost have to take an amoral stance towards it and not view power as this evil or good thing, but rather view it as the practical means to achieving a liberated life.
The gun makes a really good example of that, because the gun is just an inanimate object. There's nothing it can do in and of itself, but you put it in the hands of somebody and it becomes power. So before it's in the hands, it's just a tool. And when it's in the hands, it's just a tool of the person who's using it. And it's a great way to look at it, because I think that the right, the libertarians, the anarchists, these people, they forget how to use tools, whether it's money, whether it's guns, whether it's their arguments, whatever it is, because they think that it might be too much power, a little bit too much. We're going to go into a break. We'll be right back. We're talking to Tanner Cook. Anarchy.com if you want to follow along. As always, I have the links up there for you. Tanner Cook is my guest. He is author of Liberty and the Will to Power, a manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian. I have the link to his Facebook page up there. You can follow along there. And I also have a link, of course, to the Amazon site where you can buy the book and help support it. And then, of course, there's a link there. One of the things that's great about this social media and about the way links and things work on the internet, and it gives you all these other things too. It shows you his other book. It shows you all these other books by the likes of Nietzsche and The Myth of the Social Contract by Anarchy. I don't know. It's just it's one of those things where I can do the same thing on Amazon, looking through books, is that people will do on YouTube. It just sort of randomly going from video to video and clicking on this one or looking. Yeah, I could do that. I'll add them to my cart and then delete them from my cart, because I can't buy all those books and I'm never going to read them all. It won't happen. Go to towardanarchy.com. The links are up there. And as always, be sure to like and share and follow along on these things. Because if you don't, it just doesn't work. This is a really short segment. I want to talk some more about the book, of course, but I also want to get into the idea of self-publishing. Did you do it through Amazon, just through their functions on there?
Yeah, so it's all through Amazon. I did it with the first book and my second book here. It's pretty easy process. Amazon makes it pretty simple, and their support staff is really good. I did go out and go to another studio to have the cover made. Amazon doesn't offer, I don't believe they offer any sort of cover. They can give you the software, I think, to kind of make your own if you want, but I went out and got mine made at a studio and then uploaded it. But it's a real simple process. They make it stress-free. They cut you a check, and it's really nice. Yeah, it's a good medium for people who, like myself, I write as a hobby. I'm not a career writer or anything like that, but it allows you to get your ideas out there, mass produced, without having to rely on publishers.
And you see a decent return from it. I mean, how's it been received? How's the book? How's it doing?
So I just published recently, I think July something, I can't
Yeah, it
remember
was
the
pretty
exact
quick.
date.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
so
wasn't too long ago.
yeah, I've gotten one review, good feedback on that. They said it was good to hear. It challenged the mainstream libertarian ethic is what it did, and it gave him this reviewer a lot of good things to think about, to question. So I'm still, I'm curious. I really am curious to see what more people are going to have to say about it. I don't think it will be received well by a lot of people, just due to the fact that it's attacking some deeply held beliefs, both on the religion side and both on the kind of political side of things. But I think it'll strike the right chord, and I'm interested to see what they.
Anarchy.com. You're looking for August 23rd. I know I said the 16th earlier, but it's a time warp thing. It doesn't matter. It's all in the future. I'm talking to people a million years from now. Just click the archive button and you can find August 23rd. You see, my guest is Tanner Cook. He's author of Liberty and the Will to Power Manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian, and we're having this wonderful conversation. I think it's an important conversation, questioning some of the dogmatic ideas behind the libertarian, anarchist, voluntarist thought, and the thing that you brought up about power, I think, is really important, because that really there's a reason why the big L Libertarian Party doesn't work. The Libertarian Party doesn't work. And that's because all it is ultimately, when you get down to it, is a bunch of disenfranchised people from the right and left who don't quite have a home, who still want to use the state as some method of finding a way to manage power, instead of taking power and responsibility on themselves, being empowered themselves. And the state's happy to do that, because then the state gets more power.
Right, and to take it a step further, I don't think, let's say the Libertarian Party one day did sit on the throne, so to speak. The state has its own agenda, right? It doesn't matter which party sits there. It is an apparatus that's used for the collective, and it's usually controlled by an even smaller collective. So even if the Libertarian finally achieved their goal and sat in the president's chair, it really wouldn't have the effect that they believe it will have. You're not going to have a more free society. You're going to have the same thing. I mean, that's what we've experienced, right? It doesn't matter who sits there. It's always the same exact thing. And there's a reason for that. So I don't think political power is the best way to go about this, or maybe not even a good way at all. And it's like you were saying about kind of bringing it more towards individual responsibility. You can't see a liberated society manifest until the individual finds first a way to set themselves free, because it starts with the individual. So if you can't free yourself, you're not going to free the society around you either.
No, and it's absolutely right. And if you're not honest with yourself, and I think that this happens, it's that split. You have all these guys come into this third party, this mix of people that are supposedly in the middle, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's just a a more acute version of the larger left versus right argument, because we get in and we have the same conversations about who has the power and why they should have the power and how long it should last for, and it ends up being the same conversations. And you're right, because that's within the framework of the state. The state is its own entity, and for it to be the state, to be what it is, it has to protect itself, and it has to protect its ways. And so it can't matter who's running it. I have these dishonest conversations with people all the time, unfortunately, because they want to talk about money or economics and the manipulation by the state of these. And it's probably the single worst thing that they do. Yeah, they kill a lot of people, but they kill a lot more people by manipulating the economy. And so I have these conversations with somebody, and I'll say something about, the Federal Reserve, and they'll say, well, who runs the Federal Reserve? And I'll say, what difference does it make? Because the Federal Reserve continues to do what it does regardless of who's running it. So you're trying to have a conversation about a popularity contest, about right wing versus left wing, about Keynesian theory versus Austrian theory. And I'm telling you that this one doesn't matter. This is how this works because this is the rules. This is the way they set this one up. That's the way it's going to work because it doesn't survive if it doesn't work within that framework.
Right, and it goes to show that disconnect in the mainstream libertarian conception of power, of the institution of power, the state. They have yet to question the fundamental essence of it, and because of that, they're going to be doomed to repeat the same thing that we've seen all throughout history. The Libertarian Party is no different than any other, I would say, oppressed or allegedly oppressed class that's ever come forth and wanted to assume power. Their message is always the same. They're victimized. They're being oppressed. They're being tyrannized. So let's take over the throne, and then therefore we will no longer be oppressed and tyrannized and whatnot. The libertarian argument, at least the mainstream one, is absolutely no different in its essence than that of Antifa or whoever it is. They're all aiming at the same thing, and their arguments at the base level are all really the same. And we can see through history alone that isn't it's not going to achieve their goal. And I would question too what their honest goal is, because I wouldn't say it's a liberated society. I would say that it's a much more along the same lines as the Republicans, the Democrats, all of the entrenched parties out there. As soon as they get what they want, nothing really changes. It becomes just a struggle to maintain what they just achieved, and it's the same show over and over again. And they haven't freed themselves. They haven't freed anybody else. The liberty within their Libertarian Party is more of a misnomer.
Well, you're talking about the election cycle. You're talking about things will be better next time if I just vote a little bit harder, and that's the libertarian argument, isn't it? The capital L libertarian argument. It's that we need to vote harder. More of us need to vote and get out there and vote. Except that there's no. That's the weird mathematical error of trying to suggest that you can take from the same pool of people from the same population and generally produce different political results. The people who are involved politically are involved politically. The ideas that express themselves in a political way are expressed in a political way. They're unavoidable. They're going to be. I love the idea of the book just because it challenges these conventional ideas in this sense. I just don't think that there's enough people out there really looking at that when it comes to the people asking for change. Because they say they're asking for change, but they're not really asking for change. They're trying to change other people. They're trying to change the party that's in power. They're trying to change their own political position in life or their own financial position in life. But they're not really trying to change everything else around them. I see the people who are doing that are the people like yourself who are putting the ideas forth and just letting them go on their own. Just say, here is the unabashed truth as I see it, and just sort of put it out there in front of as many people as you possibly can, and let them make their decisions for themselves to build these parallel systems and the ideas, these things that they always talk about that will replace government, or that will just, as we could sit here and watch the political parties and the statists eat themselves sort of literally as it gets closer and closer now that we live in the apocalypse.
Yeah, we're talking about the state and the acquisition of power and the mainstream Libertarian Party and how they try to go about freeing society. But I would, to take Nietzsche's ideas, which my book is full of Nietzschean concepts and stuff like that, he believed in this thing called the Ubermensch, or the Overman or Superman, however you translate it. And it was an acknowledgement of what the mass man, what the collective, the way they think, their nature, and realizing that if you wanted to be more, if you wanted to fulfill your potential, you would have to leave that and start to make your way towards this idea of the Overman. And I think we can draw on that in the libertarian anarchist persuasion. We can think about that. And the very first thing, if you want to have a free society, you have to find a way to free yourself. You have to become free yourself and then develop that method and find ways to free other individuals. And you're going to have to separate yourself from the herd on that a little bit. I think, Ayn Rand kind of touched on that a little bit. And, say what you want about Ayn Rand. She had some good ideas and some not so good ideas. But, in Atlas Shrugged, she talks about, what's his name? John Galt, I think was who the character was. And he recognized the flawed ways of the masses, and instead of sitting there and trying to petition everybody over and over again and voting for the next politician, he disappeared. He left, and he went and created his own little world, and he flourished in that world, and he created his free society, or his freer society. But I think we can take lessons where we find them, and I think Nietzsche's Overman and Ayn Rand's John Galt, I think they present a better, a more potent pathway to liberty than any sort of political party or acquisition of political power could ever do.
Well, I think part of the problem with shared power, political power, is that it doesn't actually satisfy any base need for power. That's why it's always a race to the top while it's a race to the bottom. They're racing to the, from senator to congressman, or whichever way it goes. Maybe it's the other way, congressman to senator, then to president. They're always, they started out in the mayor's seat or something like that, or on the city council. It's always this race to the top. But fundamentally, looking at everything that drives that, everything that gets that person to do that, when they, I hate to say it because so many people love him, and I do too, and I even campaigned for him in 2012. It's not about voting, it was just about getting out the message. But Dr. Paul spent 30 years in Congress and didn't do a single thing, didn't change jack squat. They voted no on a whole bunch of stuff, saved, maybe the state of Texas a bunch of money, and did for his constituents the best that he could. But the reality is, when it comes to his influence in that system, zero. He didn't change a single thing within government, but he sure woke up a whole bunch of people on the outside that realized that you could spend 30 years working in the system and not change a damn thing.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Paul.
Love him.
But what you're saying is, I completely agree. One thing that I will give credit where credit is due to the Libertarian Party and guys like Paul is that they tend to keep this message of liberty alive, something that's been, at least in the West, particularly in America, they keep it on the airwaves. Now that's starting, in my view, it's starting to go away in a lot of important mediums. That message is starting to go away, or it's getting corrupted by, the alt-right, or whatever you want to call them. And I think that's going to be very dangerous. And I think at least one thing that the Libertarian Party can do is keep it on the airwaves, keep it in our society, this idea of a liberated society. But ultimately, like you're saying, he didn't change anything within the system, because the system, in my belief, is representative of kind of a combination of the qualities that both the ruler and the ruled desire. They come together in certain respects on what they desire, things like comfort, security, safety for the masses, but that same, the ruler it puts them in a position to give them those things to, at least in perception. And in doing so, it gives them authority and power over them. It gives them dependency, which translates into power. So they share that. And so in my view, I think that's what's driving the state and the collective. And so any Libertarian Party candidate who thinks that they're going to reverse that has a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is that they're campaigning for. You just can't change that, because to do away with that dynamic between the ruler and the ruled, there's no state then. That is what the state is. It's that institution, that cooperation between both the slave class, the willing slave class, and the master. And to think that you can somehow join that system to produce some other sort of dynamic it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what you're doing. But there's good and bad to the Libertarian Party, but they're impotent. I would agree with you on that.
Well, and the reason I think that we ended up talking about them is I think they make the perfect example of the people who are stuck in that dogmatic space that you talk about in the books. Their morality is statism. That statism is their morality. They just have a little bit twisted version of it compared to what we normally call your average statist. It's a little bit tweaked version of the idea. It's fundamentally different. Well, no, it's really not, because it's structurally the same, and its structure requires it to be fed from the bottom up, build that little pyramid again, and I think we're supposed to be out here. I think this is what Dr. Paul did. That's why I think so many of us respect him. So many anarchists and libertarians respect him, even as somebody who actually was a part of the political system, and it's because I don't think he stood on dogmatic views like that, other than sort of Dr. No thing. And then and the one place that you might want to be is if you're talking about sort of scientific, and that's in proven economic theory. He was always on the right side of that. So I think there's a lot of respect for him for that. And I think if it wasn't for him, it would be a lot worse off now, post 2012, post 2008, even if it wasn't for him. It might be a lot of other people. It might be a much more Donald Trump world today than it was. Yeah, I think maybe he kept some of the level-headed people over on that side of things. You probably have experienced this. There's been a shift, and it happens every time there's a political. It's those wishy-washy sort of middle people, the libertarians that go, they jump the fence, they go back and forth. They don't stand on a principle.
Right. It's the need to. They're not seeking the power that can set themselves free. They're trying to jump onto the power that they believe can fulfill their desires. And when they do that, when they jump on the power, these collective bandwagons of whether it's the LP party, the Republican Party, whatever, their thoughts are, well, I can affect change if I jump on this big bandwagon, this collective institution of power. That's how I can get my ideas through. But it's, again, just pointing back to the misunderstanding that it isn't going to be your power. It's that shared power concept. But ultimately, these institutions have their own agendas, and by jumping onto them, you're inserting yourself into the fences of that particular herd with that particular master. You're not, one ring to rule them all, to draw back to Tolkien, right?
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I hate to use TV and pop culture to describe things like that, but there's a reason that story exists, and it's because of the reality of who Tolkien is. If you don't know your Tolkien, you might have to look him up. We're gonna have to come back here after this break and wrap it up with Tanner. We're having this fantastic conversation. Go to towardanarchy.com if you want to follow along. We'll be right back. weird images that changes depending on how you look at it, and that's kind of what we've been talking about a little bit today with my guest Tanner Cook. He's a author of Liberty and the Will to Power, a manifesto for the Amoral Libertarian. Go to towardanarchy.com. Just look for August 23rd. You'll find the link there to the Liberty and the Will to Power Facebook page, as well as how to buy it on Amazon.com and support Tanner. It's been a great conversation, man. Good catching up with you and getting to meet you and talk about these things. I appreciate what you do. That's why I wanted to have you on the show, and I will get a copy of the book and I'll read it and I'll leave a review for you. It'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. I'm always excited to see people succeed, and so I hope that you do really well with it, because I think that, based on the conversation we've been having, it's everything I believe it would be, judging a book by its cover and the title of it, which you're not supposed to do. But as I've argued many times before, if you don't read the label, how do you know what's on the inside of it? There's a reason we put labels on things, so you know what it is, and if it's got the skull and crossbones on it, you keep your hands off it. This is inviting. It says, come on in, read me, find out something new about your world. So I appreciate that you put the work in. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and share it with everybody.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I think these conversations were really important. I think this is what keeps the idea of liberty alive and on the airwaves. So I appreciate what you do, and thanks again.
No, anytime. If you're ever up to anything new, or you ever just want to chat, that's all I do. That's all this thing is. It seems formal because of the commercials and stuff, but it's just that radio thing that I've been doing for all these years. It makes it easy for me to do it on this end, but otherwise, I'm just having these conversations every week with just interesting people, and just finding out about the things that they're doing and finding out how they're succeeding and how they've managed to be able to grow long enough to get old enough to grow this long enough. Because I don't if you're not watching the video, Tanner's got this amazing beard here and mustache thing going on. It looks good. I do not. I'm bald all the way around. I even had to shave before the show today. I thought I was starting to look a little bit too up here, but see, you got good coverage up there. You don't have that horseshoe thing going on there. So you're doing all right there.
Yeah, bald by choice is what mine is, I suppose.
Is that what it is? Yeah. I have to say, I did it long enough ago that I still had hair. It's gone away since then, and so yeah, as soon as it starts to get a little bit shaded in, I'm like, oh no, that's got to go. Buzz all that off, gotta go. And I never liked that horseshoe looking thing there.
Right.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for hanging out. And is it I don't know if you want to pitch anything. I mean, I got the links up there, and I just drop that stuff all the time so that we don't have to think about it. But I don't know if you're up to anything. You got anything else going on?
No, nothing to pitch. You've provided the links, and those are the two books I got out there. You can find them on the links that you provided: Case Against the State and Liberty and the Will to Power. And yeah, I just appreciate having me on.
Oh yeah, it's so much fun. Is writing the thing that you're doing to just sort of reconcile your reality with your world? I mean, is that your thing?
Yeah, it's a hobby. That's how I get my ideas out. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not, involved in any sort of politics. I have a full-time job elsewhere, unrelated to this. But I consider myself to be a liberty-minded individual. I want to be free myself, and I have a passion to free others as well. So I think that writing is a good medium to do that with.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of respect for the people that do the writing, because for me it's hard. I do it, and I think it's good when it's done, but it's a lot of work. Is it hard for you, or are you like one of the lucky ones? Can you sit down, you get a flow, you get going?
It's off and on. Some ideas can just spill out onto the paper, and then otherwise I really have to think about it. It just depends on what you're writing, I guess. But it's off and on.
It helps to know. So do you get to exercise your ideas where you work? Do you work around other people that you're able to talk to, and do you get some interesting conversations going?
And so it's interesting. I find myself employed. I work for a company here in town as a physical security advisor, and my boss and my coworkers are both career cops, or they were career cops, and they moved into the private sector. And they know my ideas. My boss hired me with the understanding of what my ideas were. So there's a lot of respect there. That he hired me based on my qualifications and didn't reject it based on our different ideologies. But it's an interesting dynamic, what the conversations we can have. So.
That's awesome. Well, we'll have to talk about that next time. Tanner Cook's been my guest at towardanarchy.com. Wow, but the fact is that I'm really disappointed with the quality of the camera and using Skype to capture the video has not been successful. I'm washed out, and I know that some of it is because of the fact that I'm surrounded by giant screens and it's casting extra light, but it should be able to adjust for that. And I've played with the Skype settings over and over again, and every time I go in and use the settings on it, I could point the camera at it and show you. I go through and I change the settings, and the audio's not good either. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Skype is just not. It's not what it once was, and it's definitely not what it could be. It's I guess they don't put a lot of energy into that thing. I guess it's free, so I suppose they don't put a lot of effort into making it any better. I don't know. It's just kind of frustrating because I go in and I can use the camera with all the other programs that I have. I've run some tests over and over again, and I'm looking at one of them sitting right here on the desktop. I can see it shows the little video clip, just the icon of it, and I can see that it's me. And you can see I'm normally colored. I actually look sort of tan, and I have some color because I do. I get out into the sun. It's a 720. It's not a full HD, but it is a HD, and it should be much better than that. The picture quality should be much better than that, and the fact that I can control the lighting settings in other programs tells me that Skype is the reason that I can't get it to make it so that I don't look like I'm the same color as the wall behind me, because that's what I look like. But I can see the fun stuff behind me. I see my guitar. I've talked about my Johnson before. Talked about it's terrible. I'm so white. I look like a ghost. I look like my wife. My wife is a very, very white woman, not quite albino. I look very albino-ish in here. This is probably no good not to do this. Is it even? Yeah, it is. I always talk about my Johnson. I mean my guitar. It sits right here. It's nice. But I had all these things in the background. Oh, I'm going to break something. All these things I could play it, but there's no room to play it right here. When I play it, it's not sitting right there. I sit on the other side. You can't see where I sit from here. And now I wrap my headphones around the guitar cord, so that's nice. I can't play it sitting in my chair right here, or I'd serenade you with a little something. It's not impressive. I'm not great. But I've talked about like my samurai, not a decorative piece, an actual weapon that you could actually use, because as you can see, it has a full tang. The metal goes all the way through the handle, so it's not going to break off at the handle if you strike something. And if you know what you're doing, you know how to push the force of the ground all the way through the thing, you can slice right through something. If you don't have a lot of resistance, like say an arm or a neck, like the Highlander. It's not all Highlander and South Park, and although a lot of it is. I even have this miniature, this miniature sword. I haven't figured out what to do with it. I didn't get it that long ago, and video quality is so crappy. You're not going to be able to tell. Maybe you will. It's the it's a miniature version of the Highlanders Claymore, the MacLeod clan Claymore. But it's not all Highlander movies and South Park and Rick and Morty up in here. I didn't mention it last week, but on the screen I had To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite books. The amazing Gregory Peck on the screen up there. I didn't end up mentioning it. I did immediately to roll it back and start watching it and watch the whole movie again for I don't know how many it's time after the show, though. Immediately go into relax mode, let it all out, get it all out through the microphone, and then sit back. I have Bruce Lee on the screen right now. I had to roll it back once already because they're kind of short. He already broke Chuck's neck, so I had to roll that back. I did that. What brought that to mind was me talking about. I don't even remember what I was talking about, but I had brought up the thing about Bruce Lee, the thing that he said about being water. Be like water. I don't remember what it was I was talking about. I had my little notes of a couple of things. Oh, you know what else I had? Here's one thing. One of those things I was talking about. With people say things or make claims. Well, one that I've made many times is that I can. Can you see them? Yeah, I don't know. This isn't as good for the live, just audio presentation, but I'm holding a pair of butterfly knives in my hand, and I've talked about how I can use them. It's hard to do it here in this space, but how I can actually wield one in both hands. If you watch the video later, you'll be able to see I'm flipping them out. Just like that. It's not bragging. I don't do. The point was I don't know why. It's just because you tell somebody something like that, and for a lot of people, it's like, oh well, I'm a black belt, or I can use nunchucks, or I can wield dual butterfly knives, one in each hand at the same time. If you're not actually doing it for some people, it's like a guy braggadocious thing. It's just like, oh, he's probably just showing off. He doesn't play guitar. He doesn't have a real sword. He doesn't. It's just people are always. This happens, and I've reached this point again for the third time on social media where I have this number of followers and friends and things where there's a tipping point, and it's interesting because this is the third time now that I've witnessed it. There's a tipping point in, especially after you stop paying so much attention to the individuals that you're accepting as your friends, and I've done that lately. I've been a little bit more lax about it, and so I've reached that point again. It seems to be about 2,700, 3,000 people, somewhere around there, direct friends, specifically on Facebook, not counting followers and all the other pages and stuff like that. Just that those actual friends, there seems to be a tipping point where the conversation becomes too hard to maintain. There's just too much, and I'm the guy that grooms my internet. There's a weird response when I suggest that I do this, that I actually cultivate my page and my social media and my exposure out there to be what I want people to see of me, as well as what I want to see from them. I actually take the time to block these things out. I mentioned not too long ago how they had made it so that you can't block out political ads now. Well, what they did, you can still block them out, but they tricked you. They changed it. It used to be a 3-click process, and now to block them, it's a 2-click process. But it looks like exactly like the 3-click process. So if you're not paying attention, if you're used to doing what I do all the time, is to block this stuff, this input, people, pages, whatever, news articles, whatever, that I don't want to see, so that I'm constantly seeing stuff that I do want to see and people that I do. I noticed the changes, and but it took me a minute. I'm just going through the motions. Click, click, click. I do it all the time. Click, click, click. But it takes click, click, click now. They're and it's just this trick, because they didn't do it with all the other advertisers. All the other advertisers, anything that's not political, it's still in the same place. Anything that's political, they moved it. They moved it to a different spot to block it out. And there's no reason for it except to be deceptive, at least initially. There was no point. It's the same function. It's the same function unless they want to weigh political advertisements as being more important than the other advertisements, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't care. It is. It isn't to me. I block the stuff anyway. So I think that they know. I'm certain. I mean, please, they watch every single thing else that we do. Everything, they watch it in real time, as you know, in some spaces. And so to suggest that they know that I go through and I cull the keywords, you wouldn't believe the garbage that they say. If you've never tried to manage your social media to get input and content that you actually want to see, you would be amazed at just the innocuous, obnoxious things that it associates with, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And so people wonder, well, I don't see what I want to see. Well, you have no clue what's going on in the background. I spend a lot of time in front of a computer. We're talking about this in relation to some other people we know, my wife and I. Of people who spend a lot of time in front of a computer, just playing video games or God knows what, just surfing social media. I spend a lot of time in front of my computer, but I can use almost every program. And when I say every program, I mean literally every program. I can do anything that can be done on a computer. I know how to use all programs. If for no other reason that I understand how they work, and I know where to look for things consistently, particularly if you're talking about a decent programmer, somebody who knows how to put the stuff out there in a place where people expect to find it. And so when I see people complain about the things, this is a life lesson. I know you may not think it isn't, but it's kind of important now, I suppose, with everybody at home now, and that expected to be the case for some time, if not forever. I don't see him turning back the clock on this thing. You better get used to the technology you're using and understand how it works and what it does, and how you can best use it to present the best you, and to present the best world to you, or at least the best world as you see it. TowardAnarchy.com. Shared some links with you. It's a bunch of stuff as usual. But I just had so many things that I came across this week. Just such a busy week in the world, and so many things going on, that I was noting stuff all the time. And so I want to make sure to hit a couple of these things, because I thought some of them were really cool, and that you should go watch them, participate in them, think about them. I already mentioned Tread, the Marvin Heemeyer story. That was great. It was wonderful, and I suggest everybody watch it, especially if you think that man was a hero. I suggest you watch it, and you watch it objectively. I believe that you should always you should watch everything objectively, and you should, oh man, if you're watching anything, you should know. You should. It's like driving a car. You should know how it works, how to fix it if it doesn't work for you, or you just better be rich. But then when somebody says that, you try to tell them about the world and how the world works, and you can't add 2 + 2, and you can't change a tire, and you can't change the settings on your computer. I got a question, and here's why. Yeah, they seem like drastically different things, but they're not. This is this life lesson. They're not drastically different. You should approach everything the same way. When when it comes to being successful and finding a successful way to do things. It just seems to make sense to me that when you find a particular magical path, that you do everything that way, or within reason. You know, I'm not talking about being dogmatic. We wouldn't want to do that. I saw this documentary this week after the show last week with the Death Wives. Of course, it's on the mind, and somehow it magically translates into the fingers and finding things using the controller on the TV. And this documentary, it's called "If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast," and it's by Carl Reiner, who just died. But it has Stan Lee, Jerry Seinfeld, Mel Brooks, Betty White, and it's just them talking about uh, getting old and dying. You see that in the background. You're talking about them getting old and dying and accepting, you know, just all the things that we talked about, and sort of being graceful in your age, and how and why some people live to be older. And there's certainly an argument that humor is one of those things, and having a really good sense of humor. Producer Ken shared an image, and it's an image of the yellow submarine. It's just one of these GIF moving images. But if you're not watching the video, and it's cut off for me right now, but I know it's back here, and I know it's on the wider video. I've talked about, I build Legos. I have a bunch of different Legos. I have a couple of new sets that I haven't even done yet. They've been around for a while. I have some Minions, but I have one of my cooler pieces. A little dusty. It's one of the problems with keeping these stupid things, is that they require constant cleaning if you really want to keep them nice. But it's all washed out, of course. Try to hold it at an angle that you can kind of see. It's the Yellow Submarine. It's the Lego set. It's the whole Yellow Submarine, and it's all the Beatles and the little mini figures, the little, you know, John, Paul, Ringo, and George, and then the little. Oh, what were those little guys called? The little squat little brown dudes with the
Blue meanies.
what is it?
The blue meanies.
Meanies. That's yeah. I have some other stuff there, but not I have other interesting things in the background. That was one of the things about adding the video component and getting it back in there, is that I could just kind of every once in a while show you some of these silly things, like the batleth that sits behind me. The comic books are gone. There's a bunch of white space, but I'll tell you about that. We're going to come back and we'll wrap this thing up. Share the shows, share the network, support the network. You guys are amazing. You really are, all of you. I see you all out there, the friends that I know, friends that I don't know, followers, listeners, fans. It's really cool. You're all just awesome. I do know that you're here, and I can't believe it. I was, you know, when I started talking about that, reaching that point where the conversation gets hard on the social media, it becomes kind of scary when there are a whole bunch of voices coming at you at one time, and they're kind of relying on you to be who you are, who you say you are. It's not, that part's not hard for me, but the scrutiny, it's a little tough, and it's why I've made it a point to manage my social media profile and the people who I interact with, and why I try to make it a point to not to not pick too many fights. I don't need the stress. It's not worth it. Those conversations, they're long and hard, and people aren't really listening because they have ADHD, or at least apparently that's what the world thinks of anybody who can't pay attention for more than 2 seconds. You got to drug them up, and if you can't follow rules, you have to drug them up. And there's this. They've been running these commercials. I've seen them here. They're very insidious, nasty sort of insinuation. The idea that now that your little brats are at home because the schools aren't coming back into session, and when they do, 13 people show up with coronavirus the first day, and it all falls apart, and it doesn't work, and everybody has to go back home, and they go back online anyway. So now that your obnoxious little brats are at home, and you actually have to be responsible for them for a few minutes, drug them up. Put them on ADHD medication, that'll keep them paying attention, sitting at that screen all day long, and watching whatever programming they have in mind for them. They've gone back and forth. My wife's a teacher, so we're dealing with this where we're watching the system go back and forth and fight over. And we've made decisions this year to do most of the most of it by homeschooling, and it's always been a choice, for the kids before. And this year they're kind of choosing it. And it's not because of the virus or the scare. It's because of everybody's response to it, and the mask people, and just but they're talking about medicating not just them, they're talking about medicating us as a population. They're talking about vaccinations, inoculations, soma type drugs, something like that, to put in the water or whatever, to make us compliant, to make us go out and get vaccinations for things like COVID-19. So there's a happy thought to leave you with. No, let me leave you with one more really happy thought. Next week, Bradley Thomas returns to the show. He's going to talk to us about his book. I'm excited about this, and it means a new era, a new step for the show. So we will see you next week right here on Toward Anarchy. Take care.
That was a good show.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
He's a good guest, huh?
What's that? Yeah, he was a good guest.
Yeah, I'm going to have him back on to talk to him about his coworkers and his job.
Yeah. Boy, the Skype just, the audio in it just sucks.
It's unfortunate.
It's better than a phone or anything like that, but just compared to the other one, because it's screwing with you on the music. It was hard for me to tell when you were talking coming back in because your face was whited out, you know what I mean? I couldn't see if your lips were moving, and the Skype was blocking your voice on the music. So.
Oh, wonderful.